Welcome to the Pulsating Biology's crash course video for the chapter Respiration. We have already covered all the topics of this chapter, but in this video we are going to conclude all the topics and learn more about it. So let's start with the respiration. What is respiration and how it is divided? Respiration is a breakdown of the molecules, and when you talk about the breakdown in the presence on the basis of an oxygen, we say there are two kinds of the respiration. Either they are aerobic or anaerobic. When you talk about the those reactions which include the oxygen, we say they are termed as the aerobic, and there is more yield of the energy in it. And when you talk about the absence of oxygen in a reaction, we say it is termed as the anaerobic. And whenever there is a term "an" in a reaction, we say there is an absence of an oxygen. Thus, it releases less amount of the energy. These are the two kinds of the reaction: the aerobic reaction and the anaerobic reaction. And the energy yield is major difference between both of them. Let's talk about what are the reactions and how the reaction takes place. As we have learned earlier that whenever you talk about the aerobic respiration, there is always including the oxygen. Therefore, we say when the glucose basically is combined with oxygen, it releases carbon dioxide and water as a byproduct. That includes a high yield of the energy also. So here we have learned the formula of glucose is C6H12O6. The oxygen is termed as the 6 molecules of the oxygen that combines together to form carbon dioxide and water and high yield of the energy. In regard to this, when you talk about the anaerobic respiration, where there is an absence of oxygen, the glucose is broken down in the absence of oxygen and gives carbon dioxide and water. Now, what is the importance of respiration in our human body? When you talk about the uses of energy that are basically required for the living organism to perform metabolic reactions include catabolic reactions or the anabolic reactions. That means the breaking down or even the making of a reactant or any product. We say the energy is required, and the energy is required and how it is formed. We are going to learn in such a manner that there are muscle contraction, protein synthesis, cell division, growth, active transport, nerve impulse, and the body temperature. These are the basic requirements of the body for the energy, and without energy, these all the reactions or these all the terminologies cannot be proceeded. Let's learn about the muscle contraction first. When you talk about the muscle contraction, we learn that the peristalsis is a phenomena where there is upward movement of the food particle from the digestive system that results in a vomit. We say that it consists of the two muscles. One is the longitudinal muscle, other is the circular muscle, and the contraction of those muscles basically perform peristalsis. Therefore, energy is required for that. Then we talk about the respiration or gases exchange itself. That includes the two processes that is known as the inhaling and the exhaling. They also include the muscle contractions and the muscles. Therefore, we say that the energy is required. Then, when you talk about the muscle constriction, the pupil constrictions include the pupil size enhancement and the restriction. Thus, it requires energy. The sphincter muscles that are present in many organs of our body, for example, our anus or stomach, we say that the functioning of those muscles require energy. Thus, we say that the sphincter muscle also require energy. Then, vasoconstriction and the vasodilation. These takes place in the blood vessels. That means the amount of blood that are basically being flowed to the body. Therefore, these all of the phenomena or all of the processes that require energy, including the muscles in a very large quantity. Now, let's talk about the protein synthesis. When you talk about the protein, the first thing that should appear in your mind is about the enzyme. The enzymes that are involved in the formation of protein are pepsin, amylase, and the lipase, and even the breakdown of protein. Other than that, we have hemoglobin, myoglobin. Myoglobin is mass of the muscle along with the blood, we say, and then we have insulin, and then we have antibodies. All of them require much amount of the energy and helps in the protein synthesis. Then we have cell division. The cell division is mainly linked with the red blood cells. And the red blood cells are supplied all over the body and are divided by the body in many reactions. What is meant by the cell division? Cell division means that the older cells are replaced by the new ones once they have died off, and they can be died off by any processes, whether necrosis or apoptosis. Necrosis and apoptosis are two kinds of the deaths that are basically taking place in the body. Either it is a self death or it is a very prepared death. Then when you talk about the growth is basically a permanent increase in the mass that cannot be redo. For example, plants grow. For example, animals grow. For example, human beings grow. This growth cannot be undone. Therefore, we say growth also requires energy. Then we have active transport. Active transport is a transport mechanism or a transport phenomena that requires high amount of the energy, and that energy is provided by the ATP. ATP is an energy currency of the cell that is basically generated in the mitochondria. And what is the active transport and how it works? Active transport basically moves the molecule from the region of lower concentration to the region of higher concentration against the concentration gradient. Since it moves against the concentration gradient, it requires high amount of the energy. For example, of the active transport, we have root hair cell that transport ions, and the intestine where the soluble glucose or the amino acid molecules are basically transported from one part to another through the active transport. Now let's talk about the respiration and difference between the aerobic and anaerobic. When you talk about the reactants that are included in the aerobic respiration, that includes oxygen in its process, is of course the oxygen and the glucose. Then at the anaerobic, we say there is only reactant as oxygen. However, the product does not include oxygen. When you talk about the combustion are those reactions that includes oxygen in it. Therefore, aerobic reactions give complete combustion reaction and anaerobic gives incomplete due to absence of oxygen molecule. When you talk about the energy yield, the energy yield in the aerobic is always higher than the anaerobic as it consists of only 2 ATPs. And the products that are formed in the aerobic are carbon dioxide and the water, whereas the anaerobic is either the lactic acid or the ethanol. What is the purpose of lactic acid and how it basically functions in our body? We are going to learn it in a further video. Whereas the location of aerobic respiration is cytoplasm and the mitochondria because of the ATP. And when you talk about the anaerobic, we say there is only cytoplasm. What are the stages through which the aerobic reaction goes through? It's glycolysis, link reaction, Krebs cycle, and etc. All of these are basically generate and requires ATP for their reactions and includes oxygen in themselves. Whereas anaerobic reactions include glycolysis and the fermentation. Now let's talk about the importance of lactic acid. Lactic acid and why it is required. Lactic acid is formed and accumulated in the muscle whenever there is a vigorous exercise. Vigorous exercise or any heavy physical exercise that is taking place by the body. In such a manner, what happens is that the oxygen becomes a limiting factor that is not provided in a very large quantity. However, the muscle requires it as a macromolecule content. In such a manner, the demand of the oxygen basically increases and glucose combined with oxygen to give 38 ATP. This was termed as the aerobic respiration. But when you talk about the anaerobic respiration, we say only 2 ATPs are generated. That's not sufficient for muscle to basically work. In such a condition, we say that there is the EPOC, that is the excessive post-exercise consumption, or we say there is a depth of oxygen. The oxygen quantity that is required is not being provided by the body. So what happens in order to cope up this reaction, we say that the person or the patient starts breathing deeply in such a manner that the deep breathing brings down the lactic acid and gives the glucose to the muscle. But what happens post-exercise? When you talk about the after the exercise or the consequences that after the exercise, the lactic acid builds up due to which that leads to the fatigue and the patient feels pain in the muscle. Then what happens in that condition? Basically, the lactic acid diffuses into the blood, that is taken into the liver and converted into its original position, that is the glucose, that is given to the muscle to basically function more efficiently in the form of energy. And this is the entire phenomenon whereby we say that the lactic acid accumulation helps the muscle to perform, and what are the post consequences of the exercise. Here we are done with the entire chapter. I hope you have understood. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comment section below.